This thing is 4 thousandths behind the edge. 4 thousandths. Yeah, did you hear that correctly? 4 thousandths. Bang, Neeves Knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara's around here somewhere, and today we are checking out the Jonas Iglesias Ion. This knife was lent to me by Spirited Blades, who I did get to meet up with, and we made a video showcasing some of his knife collection. Now, we didn't go through his entire knife collection, but we went through a few. So if you want to check out that video, then me and him will be getting together again soon, and hopefully we can make some more clips. So this knife is not a cheap knife. It is a custom, but it is an amazing, amazing knife. And even if you can't afford a knife like this, I think you can still get a lot out of a video like this, especially if you possibly might want to save up a little money in the future and get a little bit more of an expensive knife. Not saying maybe this expensive, but maybe just expensive for your budget. So let's get into a little bit more of what you might be getting when you possibly spend a little bit more money. Now, this knife is very expensive, and on the secondary market, even more expensive. Jonas Iglesias is very popular right now, and I can see why. Now, I guess he's kind of just hitting the knife market by storm, and his work speaks for itself. I can totally see why and why people are jumping at the opportunity to get some of his pieces. Now, he hasn't been making knives for a very long time, or at least he hasn't been known for a very long time, but for the time he has been around, people are definitely taking notice. Like I said, his work speaks for itself. So, let's get into this. So, this knife, the blade steel is AEBL blade steel that I did sharpen. We'll get into that here in a moment. And then butterscotch, antique butterscotch cross-cut Westinghouse micarta. Holy cow. Talk about some gorgeous material. And this one's more on the softer side, which is what I've noticed from the Westinghouse micarta that I have gotten to touch before, that it has a more of a softer feel, not so much of a rough texture. And like I said, this stuff is just beautiful. I love cross-cut micarta. The other side is titanium, and then a zirconium clip, zirconium thumb studs, and then you can see the pivot there. I think the pivot is just titanium, blackened titanium, but that might be zirconium as well. We're going to get more into this knife here in just a second. We're going to do some size comparisons. The backspacer, I believe, is zirconium too. It matches the clip, so yeah, the backspacer is zirconium. Let's do some size comparisons, and then we will get into these materials and this bad boy. So, this knife overall 7.5 inches. The blade length is 3 3/8, so it's a really good EDC size for a lot of people. Let's get into some size comparisons. Now, I'm going to bust out some customs right off the bat because, well, a couple different reasons. One, the person who lent me this knife talked the person who lent me this knife into buying one of these knives. So I'm going to do a couple size comparisons with a couple of his knives. This is the Nova Blades Javelin. So, very good size comparison right there. I'm going to also bring up some more known knives as well. Here's the Trevor Burger Lexic Plus. Nice, good size comparison. Man, amazing knife. All these knives are amazing. And then here's the Cody Usler I know I'm not pronouncing that right. The Cody Usler duckling. Nice good size comparison as well. And then here is the Chris Reeve Sebenza. You can see it's smaller than the Sebenza. Flip it, go pivot to pivot. And then here's the Giant Mouse Ace Biblio. Smaller than the Ion, but still a pretty good size comparison. And then here's a knife most people know the size of, the Benchmade Bug Out. And they are almost identical. So AEBL steel does very well when it's ground very thin. And one of the reasons why is because it was originally made for razors, the type of razors that would be inside of razors, you know, for shaving and stuff like that, the type of blades that would be inside of razors. So when it's ground thin like this is when it performs its best. And it might not perform as well with different grinds or different thicknesses. So it's best served, or its best results come from when it is finer and when it is thinner. That's when it performs at its highest peak. And we'll get into how thin this knife is and the sharpening and everything here in a minute. But right now we're just talking about the steel and the performance of AEBL. So even though it's maybe doesn't have the edge retention of some other steels, it performs its best when it's ground very, very thin and very, very fine. So it's a great steel for custom makers to work with. And, you know, along with CTS XHP, CPM 154, and steels alike. Now, another good reason why they're such a good steel is because unlike some other steels that might be more difficult to work with and might be considered more of a super steel, they also have more of a likely chance of chipping. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, not if they're done right. And that in itself is more difficult to do too. And even if it's done right, when it does say hit certain things when you're cutting, it's going to have more of a chance of chipping rather than rolling. It's going to be more difficult to strop back. So even though you might get longer edge retention, when it does lose edge retention, it's not going to just strop right back and get back to work. It's going to need a full-blown sharpening. And it might not even be able to be honed back because it might be more chippy. This steel can be stropped right back to true, and then if it's beyond stropping, it can be honed back. So you will, in return, get to lose less steel from sharpening and keep using the same steel from your original edge that you put on it. So that's also a great thing when you're dealing with knives that are this expensive, because when you get little use out of it, you want to be able to just come home after the day's end and you've used your knife a little bit and just strop it right back up to good, rather than having to deal with removing steel and sharpening it, and it being more of a fuss than you want to deal with from your everyday EDC carry. One of the main things that stands out, aside from the fit and finish and all those things that we're going to get into, is this action. This action, it's something you almost have to experience to understand how great this detent is. It is on bearings. It is on ceramic bearings. So when you put pressure on this, and also I want to just show these thumb studs really quick, because these thumb studs have a little bit to do with this too. It gives you a nice placement So when you put your thumb up to it, sorry about my hands. Gotta put on the old bloody knuckles. Not sponsored. So when you get your thumb up to the thumb stud, it gives you a nice pad with this little angle right there. And when you put the tension there, as soon as you build up tension and you break the detent, it just flies. It pops. And it's something that you usually don't get from a lot of other knives unless if they are on bearings, and which this one is. So the action that you're getting from this knife with such a crisp detent. Listen to this detent. Nice crisp detent coupled with the ceramic bearings. It just gives you such a powerful action. And the detent is strong but not heavy, if that makes sense. It's a strong detent, but it's not a heavy detent. So it's just crisp. And it's a detent that you can enjoy over and over. And it doesn't annoy you. Like, it doesn't get, you know, too powerful to where, like, you go like this and you're constantly fighting it. And it's like making your fingers sore. It doesn't have that effect. Even on the reverse detent, it's so easy to flick. It's just as easy with the middle finger flick as it is with the thumb because it's so fine-tuned. Now, the drop on it, and you can also hear that. Listen to that. That's only do a couple slow rolls. Very nice sound. So the drop on it, the detent is right there, and you can push past it if you want to. But when you do get past it, which you can also drop right past it because it doesn't have the flipper tab. Since it doesn't have the flipper tab, there's nothing in the way from you just unlocking it and being past the detent. Then the drop, it's a couple shakes to get it shut, but you can easily just do the one shake and it's all the way shut very easily. Very nice. This thing is as centered as a knife could possibly get. The blade to handle ratio is as close as you can get. I mean, it is, I can feel the tip of the blade, but I have to like try to feel the tip. Now, another thing that is the best thing about this knife is this grind. This thing is 4 thousandths behind the edge. 4 thousandths. Yeah, did you hear that correctly? 4 thousandths behind the edge. I put a new edge on this thing. I did not change the angle because if I change the angle, like say if I made it more, if I laid it back a little bit, it's 4 thousandths. That it'd be too steep, you know. So this thing dull is still sharp, but I bet on those sharpness testers, you know, where they click and they check the sharpness. I bet you this thing would be sharper than most knives when this one's dull. Sharper than a lot of knives that are freshly sharpened because it's so thin that it's always sharp. So now putting a new edge on it was very easy. So easy because it's almost like doing a micro bevel, but it's actually the edge. Let's get in close. I mean, you can barely see it because it's so small. Let's get in even closer. But it's a very even grind from one side to the other. I did take a couple clips. I tried making a video, putting it on Instagram. And I talked about sharpening it, and then I showed it whittling a hair, and then I showed it going through tissue paper, and then I showed it going through a paper towel. And for some reason, when you watch it on Instagram television or whatever, the sound just left. I have no idea why. There was sound in the video when I posted it. I have no idea. But this thing will absolutely whittle hair, go through paper towel, go through tissue. I mean, it's it's also not that thick of a blade. I mean, it gives you a good thickness, but then with this double hollow grind, let me say that again. This is hollow, and then this is hollow too. So it gives you like almost like a shark fin up on top. It's a false edge because it's not sharp. It is, sorry for the focus. And it's tapered from a thick, then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner all the way down to the tip. Now this center part right here would be obviously thicker, which gives you a little bit more strength throughout the center of the blade, but then also throughout the tip, because like I said, this tapers from thicker here to thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner till it gets to the tip, and then it's nice and thin, but it adds a little bit of strength right behind the tip. It's so well thought out, especially for like EDC, because when you're using it, it's almost like say if you're going to do some utility cuts, it's like a claw, like, and I would call this a drop foot blade shape, 100% drop foot. And then it gives you the little bit of belly for regular use, and you can get up really close to the blade for push cuts. We're going to get into the ergos in 1 second. There was something I left out about this blade. It's got a false edge right here to here. Now, I left it a false edge because that's the way the designer designed it. So, and I think that he did that. Let's see if we can get it on camera. You see it right there. So that's not sharp from here back. I think he did that so that you can use this and not worry about it. Because when I close it, there's no way I could touch that blade even if it was sharp. So I don't think he did it for that reason. So the only reason why I can come up with is for you to have a pinch grip right here, for you to grip it like this and not worry. Because it's so thin, it would absolutely cut you if it was sharp and you did this. So I think he was just trying to let you get, just more of an area that was well thought out. And the ergos on this thing are fantastic. It's got the thickness here with the depth and how contoured all this is. It's so rounded. Your hands just wrap around it very nicely. And right here, back here, in my hand, my pinky just settles perfectly right there. In this spot right here on the spine, pushes right up into my palm nice and securely. This spot right here is perfect for my fingers to land. And then when I want to get up to the blade a little closer, bang, right there. Right up there. And then if I really want to get some push cuts, it's not real thick, so I'm not going to say like that for push cuts you have the best leverage or anything, but it's got a good all-around shape and thickness and everything to it that makes it to where it's capable in a lot of different situations. So the clip works good. In and out of the pocket. I did find there was a little more resistance on the way out, but it could be my jeans, but that'll definitely be like a complaint if I was going to put it into a bad. It's such a stupid complaint because it doesn't hurt nothing. It's just on the way out of the pocket. The seam where the stitching is, I just found it kind of stopping right there and then me having to pull it just a little bit harder. And, I don't want to make it sound like it goes in and out of the pocket bad, because it doesn't. When you're critiquing a knife like this, it's the little tiny details you're kind of critiquing because they don't give you much to give bad. But I got to come up with some bad, so I'm going to do my best. Now, the access to the lock bar, Super easy. I mean, I love this access to lock bar. Now, a lot of times I don't like it when they just give you this little cutout on both sides. Normally, I don't like that because normally it's still something you have to like fight to get into. Not with this. It's not even a thought. It literally feels like a button. This part right here just feels like you're just pushing a button. It's so easy. Okay, so I know I've said a lot of the good things, and everything is just so well done. Even the jimping is, there's not even much jimping, yet it works like a full path of jimping because it's nice and sharp. So even if it's on the back of my thumb right here, it's still working. If it's up here, it's still working. It's just got that good amount of grip. Like if I'm sliding my thumb, it'll stop right there if I'm putting pressure. My thumb likes to sit right there in that swedge when I'm up here. But let's talk about a couple bad things. So, one bad thing, now this, obviously it's a custom knife. So, you see the way the satin is going back and forth this way. I don't prefer that, and I know that's a hand-rubbed satin finish. I know that. You can even get production knives with hand-rubbed satin finishes. But they tend to let scratches show up, which if you worry about scratches, then that could be considered a bad. To me, I welcome scratches, so to me, it's just, I mean, I'm not saying I go out and intentionally try to put scratches on, but I'm just saying, though, through the time of use when you use a knife, it's kind of like, you know, you're giving it, you know, you're putting your impression on the knife while the knife's, you know, putting its impression on you. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's, you know, kind of a mutual thing between you and the knife. You know, you're using the knife and it's going to show a little bit of wear. That is not a bad thing. That is a good thing, in my opinion. But next bad thing. So I talked about the clip on the way out of the pocket. Another thing, which this one's not that big of a deal, but the screws are only on one side. They screw into this. Some people would say that could be a bad thing because if this side strips out, you know, But this is a knife. I guarantee if something happened like that, you could probably send it in and they would deal with it. I don't know that for sure, but yeah, it's one of those things. So now the next thing. You can kind of get the tip if you try to push right there. I can feel the tip right there. Another thing is it kind of has a little bit of a sound. Listen. It's not like bad. It's just, it kind of sounds like rubbing. Now, I've oiled it, and it's not that. I think it's just the way it sounds. I noticed Andrew's knife had a little bit of the same sound. I think it's just the tension from the lock bar. And it might be something that just takes a long time to break in. Now, another thing, but I don't think the rubbing sound, it doesn't affect it at all. It's super smooth, so... But it's just one of those things. Now, another thing is it doesn't come with the steel lock bar insert, and I know that's not really that big of a deal to a lot of people. And with the blade geometry that it has, I don't consider that bad, really, because, I mean, absolutely no movement whatsoever. I couldn't muscle this if I tried. And when I look at the lock face, the geometry on it is fantastic. I mean, look at that. And the lockup is nicely placed, perfect, nice and early. And I don't see it sticking because, I mean, this thing is as smooth as any lock bar insert could ever be, if not smoother. But, you know, I know they tend to break in faster. So, or not break in faster, they tend to move over faster, but it's kind of a dumb complaint because, like I said, with this blade geometry, I don't see it moving over. I mean, I just don't. I can see right where it's locking up, and that Maybe it'll move over, maybe it won't. I prefer lock bar inserts just because it makes me feel a little more secure, but there's nothing wrong with this one. That's just a, it's a very tiny complaint. The next thing is there's no over travel stop. So basically, I could unspring it if I tried, but it would hit the clip. So is it really gonna? Doubt it. But it's, I have to say it, so, all in all, this knife is amazing. The price tag on it is between probably $1,500 and $3,500. Depending on if you're getting it brand new or the secondary market. The secondary market is always going to be more expensive because these things are very sought after. Is it worth it? I mean, that is for you to decide. I know a lot of people would say no, but then a lot of people would pay it in a second because of the type of work that went into making this, the designer himself, the quality of the work. I can put 1,000 hours into something and put 200 hours into something, and the 200 hours meant more than 1,000. It's about the quality of the work you put into it, and you can tell the quality of the workmanship that went into this is, it was done at the highest standard. It's definitely an incredible, incredible knife that I am so happy that I got to experience. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you, brother. I love all you guys. Peace.